Eli Carter had always been a man of hard work and little luck. The sun rose over the endless plains, casting golden streaks across his tiny, worn-down ranch. Dust clung to the fences and the dry grass crackled underfoot. He looked over the last remaining cow in his small herd, a thin creature that barely had enough strength to carry itself across the fields. Everything else had been lost, his savings swallowed by the drought, his small crops withered under the scorching sun, and neighbors had quietly begun to pity him, whispering about how the poor rancher was destined for nothing but misery. It was then that a strange offer arrived. A traveling matchmaker had come to the town, her wagon bright against the dusty horizon. She spoke in careful, confident tones, offering Eli a deal that seemed impossible at first. There was a woman, she said, a stranger no one wanted, waiting in the nearby county. If Eli agreed to marry her, he would receive a healthy, strong cow in return, enough to save his ranch and perhaps even bring it back to life. The townsfolk laughed at the idea. Marry a stranger for a cow. They scoffed. But Eli's stomach twisted with hunger and worry. With no family left and only one cow standing between him and destitution, he made a decision he would never forget. The day of the wedding was hot and still. Eli stood in the small wooden church, unsure if he was nervous or relieved. The bride arrived in a simple wagon, covered with a faded blanket, and Eli's eyes widened. She was unlike any woman he had ever seen, heavy-set, quiet, and reserved, with eyes that seemed to watch everything and reveal nothing. Her name was Martha, the matchmaker whispered, and she had traveled far to reach him. Eli felt the weight of everyone's eyes, the townsfolk whispering behind their hands. Still, he greeted her with a polite smile, extending his hand as best he could. She accepted it silently. The ceremony was brief, almost mechanical. Words were exchanged, vows spoken without warmth but with the precision of duty. Outside, the wind stirred dust into the sunlight, and the cow awaited Eli's care. The matchmaker smiled knowingly, her task complete, and drove away, leaving the couple to face the quiet of the plains. Eli and Martha walked back to the ranch, the silence between them thick and heavy. The old wooden house creaked under the weight of its own age, and Eli wondered if the walls had always held secrets, or if they would create new ones tonight. That evening, Eli tried to break the ice. He offered Martha a simple meal, the best chair by the fire, and spoke gently about the ranch and the cow that would save it. She listened without much response, her hands folded tightly in her lap. When bedtime came, Eli thought the evening would end as it always had, with quiet, mutual discomfort. But Martha did something unexpected. From somewhere deep in her dress, she pulled out a small key and locked the bedroom door behind her. Eli, standing in the hallway, blinked in surprise. Questions swirled in his mind. Why lock the door on the first night? Was it fear, habit, or something else entirely? He felt a twinge of shame and confusion but also a strange curiosity. He would have to wait, he realized, because some things could not be rushed. Not trust, not love, and certainly not the future of his little ranch. The first night passed slowly. Eli sat on the creaky wooden bench in the hallway, the fire from the hearth flickering against the walls. The room Martha had locked behind her seemed like a sealed mystery, and Eli couldn't help but feel a mix of frustration, worry, and curiosity. He had never met anyone quite like her. All his life, people had trusted him easily, neighbors, friends, even the occasional traveling salesman. But Martha was different. She carried herself with caution, like a fortress built of silence and distance. By morning, the sun rose over the plains, painting the ranch with soft light. The cow, strong and healthy, grazed lazily in the corral, oblivious to the tension inside the house. Eli prepared breakfast carefully, placing the food on a rough-hewn table, hoping Martha might join him. But she remained in her room, quietly moving around behind the locked door. He called out gently, offering a warm welcome, but there was only silence. Eli realized that patience would be required, more than he had ever imagined. The woman he had married was not like anyone he had met before. She needed time, space, and perhaps proof that he could be trusted. Days passed in this quiet rhythm. During the day, Martha emerged from her room, a mystery wrapped in action rather than words. She worked tirelessly, mending fences, feeding the cow, cleaning the house, and even repairing old tools that had long been neglected. Her strength was remarkable, her movements precise and confident. Eli watched her from a distance, fascinated and increasingly grateful. She had brought a kind of life back to the ranch that had been missing for months. Yet, the nights remained the same, locked doors and whispered thoughts in the dark. Eli began to understand her in small ways. He noticed the careful way she handled the cow, the quiet pride in her work, and the fleeting moments when her eyes softened while tending the fire. One evening, a storm blew across the plains, rattling the windows and forcing the couple inside. The wind howled like a living thing, and the old house groaned under the pressure. Eli found himself sitting by the fire, staring at the locked door. Then, for the first time, Martha spoke. Her voice was low but steady. She told him of past betrayals, of townsfolk who had laughed at her weight and judged her unfairly. She spoke of nights spent alone, guarding herself against cruelty, and of a life where trust had been a luxury she could not afford. Eli listened without interrupting, understanding that her locked door had been both a shield and a statement. He felt no anger, no impatience, only a deep respect for the strength it must have taken to survive. That night, the storm raged on outside, but inside, a fragile connection began to form. He realized that patience, kindness, and quiet understanding were the keys to entering Martha's world. The cow in the corral might have saved his ranch, but trust would save their marriage, and it would take more than any bargain to earn it. As the wind howled and the fire crackled, Eli sat in silent determination. He promised himself he would wait, no matter how long it took. For the first time, he understood that love was not about possession or convenience. It was about respect, patience, and the courage to open a locked door, one day at a time. Weeks passed on the plains, and Eli began to notice subtle changes in the ranch. The fences were sturdier, the barn cleaner, and the small fields, once neglected, showed signs of life. The cow he had received in exchange for his unusual marriage thrived under Martha's care, and even the other animals seemed calmer with her around. Yet the nights remained quiet, her bedroom door locked, a boundary that Eli respected but longed to cross. Despite the distance, he felt a growing admiration for the woman he had married, a woman whose presence, though silent, brought purpose and hope back to his life. During the daylight hours, Martha revealed herself in ways that words could not capture. She mended broken tools, sorted firewood with precision, and cooked meals that nourished both body and spirit. Her laughter, rare but genuine, echoed softly through the house when she caught Eli making a clumsy mistake. Slowly, the barriers between them began to shift. Eli discovered that she was not simply a stranger, she was someone shaped by hardships, someone who had learned to rely on herself when the world offered nothing. He began to admire her not just for what she did, but for who she was, resilient, independent, and quietly brilliant. One evening, a storm swept across the plains. The wind rattled the windows, and rain poured in sheets, soaking the corral and the fields. Eli and Martha found themselves trapped indoors, working side by side to secure the animals and the house. The storm created an intimacy that had been missing before, forcing them into shared space and purpose. After the last animal was settled, they returned to the warmth of the hearth. Eli, emboldened by necessity, spoke to Martha for the first time about her past, the loneliness she must have endured, the hardships she had silently carried. Martha hesitated, then spoke. Her voice, soft but unwavering, revealed scars Eli could not have imagined, childhood mockery, adults who had judged her harshly, and years of fighting to survive in a world that had been cruel. She explained that the locked door was never meant to punish him but to protect herself, a line she could not cross until she felt safe. Eli listened carefully, offering no judgment, only understanding and a promise that he would not betray the trust she was slowly giving him. The storm raged outside, but inside, a fragile bond began to form. In the flickering firelight, Eli realized that Martha's strength was not just physical, but emotional, a deep reservoir of resilience shaped by years of endurance. He understood that the success of the ranch was now inseparable from the slow, patient opening of her heart. Trust, he learned, could not be bargained for like a cow, it had to be earned, nurtured, and protected. By the time the storm passed, the first real signs of partnership had begun to appear. Martha no longer avoided conversation entirely, and Eli had learned the art of waiting, listening, and appreciating her silent contributions. Together, in their own way, they had weathered the storm, both outside and within themselves. And for the first time since he had agreed to the unusual marriage, Eli felt hope that their strange union might grow into something neither could have predicted, a life of mutual respect, slowly built, one careful day at a time. Weeks had turned into months, and the ranch, once struggling under Eli's burden alone, now thrived in ways he had never imagined. Fields that had been dry and lifeless bloomed with sturdy grass, the barn was orderly, and the cow, once the symbol of his desperation, was now the healthiest of the herd. But more importantly, the heart of the house had changed. Martha, once a quiet, guarded stranger, had begun to open herself fully, her presence no longer silent but vibrant. Slowly, cautiously, the locked door of the bedroom had become a memory rather than a barrier. It began with small gestures. One evening, Eli returned from checking the far fields to find Martha sitting by the fire, a cup of warmth waiting for him. She smiled, not politely, not formally, but genuinely, and for the first time, Eli felt the invisible walls around her begin to crumble. Conversations that had been brief and cautious became longer and richer. She shared stories of her childhood, the struggles she had endured, and her dreams, small though they were, for a quiet, safe life on the plains. Eli listened, always gently, always respectfully, knowing that trust had to grow at its own pace. The couple began to work side by side more openly. Fences were repaired with shared effort, crops planted and tended together, and the animals fed with synchronized care. Eli marveled at how Martha transformed the ranch with her intelligence, patience, and sheer determination. It was no longer just a place of survival, it had become a home. And in these shared moments, something deeper blossomed, a bond built not from necessity or barter, but from mutual respect, understanding, and the slow, steady shaping of trust. One quiet night, Eli finally spoke the words he had held in his heart for months. "I never imagined this," he said softly, "that a strange marriage could feel like this." Martha looked up from her mending, her eyes reflecting the firelight. She smiled, a touch of warmth and mischief there, and replied, "Life has a way of surprising even the most careful hearts. But we've made it work, haven't we?" Eli nodded, realizing that she wasn't just talking about the ranch. She meant them, their strange, awkward, and unexpected partnership. By spring, the ranch had become a small marvel in the county. Neighbors no longer whispered or laughed, they watched with quiet admiration. The cow, once a gift that had seemed transactional, was now a symbol of new beginnings. Eli and Martha moved through their days in a rhythm of cooperation and companionship. Love, unspoken but deeply felt, grew naturally from trust and respect. The locked doors and cautious silences of the early days were gone, replaced by laughter, shared meals, and evenings by the fire where plans, hopes, and quiet dreams were exchanged freely. Eli often reflected on the strange bargain that had brought Martha into his life. He had married a stranger for a cow, yes, but what he had gained was far greater. He had found a partner, someone whose strength matched his own, someone who had transformed his lonely ranch into a home filled with life, hope, and quiet joy. And Martha, in turn, had discovered that trust and safety could exist again, that she could be seen and valued for who she was. Together, they had turned an unusual marriage into something enduring, a testament to patience, understanding, and the quiet power of human resilience. The plains stretched endlessly around them, golden and wild, but within the walls of the old ranch house, something remarkable had taken root, a life rebuilt, a bond forged, and the knowledge that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings could lead to the truest happiness.